anniversary of the Dutch Angular community. My name is Mischa Dasberg, and I'm a software architect at JPoint. For the past 3 years, I've been assigned at ING, and for the last year, I've been privileged to introduce Angular and to work with Angular at ING.
Yeah, my name is Henk from the Brink. I work 3.5 years at ING now, and a half year with Angular. So let's go to the agenda. We have a few topics for this presentation. First, we're going to talk a bit about AngularJS at ING. Second, what is Spectangular and what does it mean? Third, we're going to tell you a bit about the theory of testing. Well, it's already a bit done, so, well, hopefully you will learn something from it. And last thing, we will code some tests.
So, what does AngularJS at ING mean? We started a little bit about a year ago using AngularJS. A colleague of mine, Remco, and I started a proof of concept separate from each other without even knowing that we were both doing Angular. And since then, about 30 teams have been working with AngularJS, and it's growing fast. We are developing across multiple channels, so that means you have assisted channels, which is for the banking. You have the open environment, which is ing.nl, and you have the restricted part. That's where you need to log in, you see your bank accounts and stuff. So, why did we need all this new stuff? Well, what we wanted to do is create new features faster and deploy it more rapidly. So, to do that, we need a lot of testability and maintainability. The code needs to be structured, needs to be flexible and also extendable. And where we came from was a server-side generated piece of code which used JSPs, taglibs, and a couple of JavaScript building blocks, which were, well, to put it slightly, not really extendable and weren't testable anymore, and weren't tested almost at all. So the backend part was so. So what we wanted to do is, well, have testable code and stuff that you see over here.
The reason why we want all this new stuff is because we want to go to production. We want to go automatically to production every 15 minutes, which sounds good, but it's not the goal. It's not the goal. We're just willing to.
Yeah.
So we need to have all the options to do it. To do so, we need to switch technologies. So of course we're using AngularJS because we're a bit weird if we were using something different. We're using Grunt for the build process, Power for the dependency management, and locally the teams use Node.js for developing their application.
Yeah, so all of this we call Spectangular. Spectangular was initially the team that introduced Angular at ING, and since then we have been building a couple of things. So Spectangular consists out of a style guide, which is a HTML, CSS based implementation based on Bootstrap. We have a component library, and next to that we have a build stream. So putting it all together, we have a style guide that gives us styling. We have a component library which adds behavior to those components, and we have a build street that assures us quality without compromise. And all of this should help teams develop faster. They should only implement the component libraries, the components in the library, because we want to have a uniform customer experience.
Yeah, so enterprise scale AngularJS, what does it mean? Well, there are, like Mischa said, there are 30 plus teams using it. We have 50 features currently and increasing rapidly. Because we want a uniform user experience for all our customers. So that's what we enforce with style guide. And because we need to be highly available, millions of people use ING, we're also highly visible, which means that every change we do is seen by millions of people. So we need to be careful, and we need to make sure the quality is okay. So how do we do that? We focus, of course, not on speed. To do so, we have a built street which does some checking. We're checking for the code qualities like JSint or if they're using console log. We're running all unit tests, and see if nothing fails. We're checking the coverage of the unit test to see if it meets the threshold. And we're running all end-to-end tests, and also checking if the coverage meets the threshold.
We're now implementing that. So.
We're now currently implementing that, so get a sneak preview.
Yeah.
If the team fails, it won't go to the development environment. We have Wally, which is a project dashboard. Here the teams can see what the coverage is and why they are failing, so that if they fail, it is clear for the team.
Yeah. So for all the checks that the build system does, you can see on the dashboard what's going wrong. So for all the gauges that you see, it's the coverage. So if your team falls off of the environment, you can see why. So what we've done is, we set a goal to do continuous delivery. What we've already accomplished is that we are building and deploying all code every 5 minutes and deploying it to the development environment, and every 30 minutes to the test environment, every 2 hours to acceptance. And we can deploy every 15 minutes to the production environment, but we still have some confidence checks which have a manual step into the deploy process. So accidental hiccups that we didn't catch during the street can still be found before we open all the stuff from production. So we build and deploy everything from the component library, the style guide, to every project that's using Angular and Dasberg Angular. And it's taking us a while, but it's continuous delivery is working. And but we are here today to the topic was a little bit of testing, so Angular and testing. What we think at ING is that testing is very important. If you do TDD or BDD, you can adapt to changes more rapidly. So if you have your entire system tested and there is a change or a change in the component library, if you have a test, you can more easily detect a failing piece of your functionality than if you didn't do it. You write less code, you have less bugs, you're able to guarantee the functional state of your application if you have a good coverage and a good feeling about what you have built. It is also a representation of your acceptance criteria. So if you write BDD syntax styling that Jasmine provides for you, in the describe it syntax, you can write your acceptance tests in a way that your business can see, well, these are the acceptance criteria that you specify. These are the results. And it's also a running documentation. It's easy to see what you've built and how you should use it, depending on the tests. There are a lot of people that think doing TDD or BDD is a little bit hard and see it as a cons to the development process, because you need to think before you write your implementation, and it takes more time because you have to write all the code, the tests on forehand. But we think that it is a benefit. So if you write your tests before, you can assure that you can adapt to changes more rapidly, and you have less code, and you have more confidence in your quality. So There are two types of testing that we see. You get the unit testing on the one hand, which basically we think is testing individual units of code. So if you have dependencies, services that are injected into your controllers, you should mock them. You shouldn't test DOM manipulations in your unit testing code. You should do that in your end-to-end testing. So this is, like you already said, white box testing. Next to that, you have the end-to-end testing. End-to-end testing is in our what we think that it is testing everything that includes your DOM. There's one thing that we specifically ask for teams that are working with Angular, is that they need to mock the APIs. We want to run all the tests locally. If you want to run it on an environment, you're free to do so, but in the build system we only test against mocks. So it's fast, it's reliable, and we can have a better accuracy of our applications, because APIs can be slow, can fail, can be offline, a new version can be deployed. You never know. So and end-to-end testing is black box testing, well, at least that's what we think. So that was fast. Yes.
Yeah, if I can ask a question.
Yeah.
If it's really end-to-end, how do you test all these scenarios that you say, well, it's hard to be able to test?
What you can do is, Angular gives you the $HTTP backend, so you can mock every scenario that your API can do. So if you test your application using the mocks, and you test your API using Fitness or whatever tool you would like, you catch it in both ends. And if you have, for instance, a bug in production, or you catch it on a development environment or test or whatever, what you can do is you can just create a new test using a mock response, and test how your application should handle.
So you mock all your error scenarios.
Yeah, you should do that. Yeah.
So now we're going to code. Well, he is going to code.
Yeah, I'm going to try. So when a team starts at ING, when they want to start with an Angular project, they do an intake with respecting their team. What they do is they present the UX designs, and we can say, you can use this component and this component and this. Oh, and this is a little bit different from the default style bag says. Maybe we need to challenge the UXer to see if this should be a general thing, or this should be done specifically for that project, because we want to have a uniform user experience. So once they've done the intake, we generate a project. So what we first do is create a project in Stash. So okay. That was already done. So let's see if we can get it here. So Stash is just a Git repository system which adds basically the same features as GitHub does for you, only then private. So if the password's incorrect. So what we do is we create a project. So it's basically, let's call it anniversary. And then, well, you don't have anything, just an empty repository. So we open we run a script, which is called gen sub, and we say the project is going to be called anniversary. Now it generates all the project setup, all the branches and stuff, and it uses Geoman underneath. So what we now do is type again anniversary, and it created an entire project for you based on a skeleton application that we created using Geoman generator. So as you can see now, I have a project containing all the stuff. What do we do next?
Let's make an application.
Let's check it out first. So I now generated the stuff. So let's git clone. Let's clone the project. Check out develop. Check out the development branch. I didn't know if we would have a running internet connection, so I created a bash task to copy all the npm and power stuff. So I now copied it. So if we now create a new project using the stuff that I just checked out, I should have a working project. So this is basically the application I just generated. You get the project-specific CSS, the JavaScript, all the power dependencies which are specified in the power file. So we use the transitive dependency management, as Henk already said, from Power. And if I now type grunt server, it should have a application which just shows us the version of the component library which I have locally installed in the version of the app. It doesn't basically show you a cool application, but this is the starting point for every project. So maybe you can tell something about the docs.
Yeah, every directive we have is documented with ngdoc. So Mischa will start the documentation app. So every directive we have is documented with ngdoc.
Yeah.
And you can see here how you can use it. So let's go to the ING wizard.
Yeah, we are going to show you a little bit how a team can implement a wizard, and then we're going to use a demo application that I've already created. So this is basically what you see when you go to the English side, well, the old one, because they now use Genie to generate their stuff. But what you can see here is how you can configure and use an object. All the stuff is data-driven, so you need to provide a wizard with a configuration object. So this is just the documentation app, which works completely based on the stuff that's defined over here. So let's So let's go to the partial and just remove the stuff with the versions that you had seen on the screen. And if I type ing wizard, you should already see something like a gray box. The wizard is not configured with the config object, so to do that, we just go to the, where is the site? The documentation site. What you can do is pick the script. Well, it's just a basic implementation of the configuration object. So you can just copy it as a theme and then
adjust it accordingly.
Yeah. So
what you need.
I'm just going to create a wizard controller and say Angular.module.
Do you use Yeoman to create a new module?
Yep. We have created our own Yeoman generator based on the...
For a scaffolding, for instance, like here, did you create a new controller?
Yeah.
Oh. Teams go to the documentation app to see how they can use it, and it's a good thing. We should use JML to create the things. So I just copied the example. Let's edit almost, strict source.
No, it's not in your controllers.
Oh crap, sorry. So, yeah, source. Okay, so let's provide it here. Wizards. That's wrong. So now I should. Oh, I already have a wizard. If I would add a ing wizard footer, I would have the navigation.
Wow.
So then you can work with it. Well, to show a little bit more, what we can do is if I go to the wizard and I specify the HTML in the wizard steps. Then spell steps. Just copy it here, and you get a working version. Well, all the directives that we've written in filters and services, the teams can find on the documentation page, so they can start working with it rapidly. If there are changes or different behavior that should be implemented, it should be challenged using the UXer, because we want to assure a uniform user experience across all the applications that we create. Well, I can do a lot more showing the demo, but I already created a demo application, which we used in a previous presentation at the GDG event. But we're now going to talk about testing. So
Let's make some tests.
yeah, let's close this one. So the demo app. It's basically a already built version of what I just did. So if I just say run server, it will now hopefully start. It will start an application which basically has some validation and shows some data on a finished step. So let's go through the code. Starting off, we already said for unit testing we want you to mock your dependencies. So if you have, for instance, a service that you inject, so we have three steps in the wizard. We just have the wizard controller, which just contains the configuration. We have the change step, the last step, the content step. Those are the controllers that we created for the wizard. If you want to test this, well, we have, for instance, a change step controller, which has a dependency on the. Can anybody read it, by the way? Yes. On the all my personal data service. That service calls an API using $resource. So if I'm going to write a test for instance, the all my personal data, I should use $HTTP backend to mock my service call. because I am not interested in how $resource does its work. I'm interested in that when I get my when I use this service, it is going to call that API. That's basically what I want to test here. So I've already injected $HTTP backend and the service. So what I want to do here is $HTTP backend. But when, if I look at the service, it's going to do I have a get method, which uses method get, and this is the API. It's going to call, and I just say get. The next part is the actual API that I'm going to call, and then response. I've created a mock object, which just contains the mock. I can also use this mock data in my end-to-end test if I want. So let's finish this mock. Mock.personal data, and it is going to return for me a content type application JSON. So the next thing I need to do is call the actual service. So let's call for result is service. I just mapped the service into a variable service.get. I want to flash the actual HTTP backend, and then I want to do an expectation to actually see if this API is called. So expect Angular that equals result and max personal data. So this should work. Hopefully it does. So I'm going to run a unit test, and of course it failed. Oh, sorry. I need to expect something. So let's run it again. What is going wrong? I broke something, of course. I hope so. Okay, well, instead of debugging, I can I'll skip this one. Easy work. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're correct. I didn't implement the controller, so let's change the spec to only all my personal data spec. It's getting hot. Yeah. Okay, so the test works. What you see here is I do not have a lot of test coverage yet, because I only tested one test. So this one is tested. So if you go to the controller, I would want to mock my service instead of mocking HTTP backend again. I want to mock the actual service. I'm not interested in what the service does underneath. That should be tested in the test spec of the service. So let's open the controller test. and this one failed just a second ago. So what I want to do is I want to mock my service object. So using Jasmine spy objects, I can say I have a function which I want to mock, which actually is the service, this function, which I'm going to call from my controller, and I can say Jasmine.create spy. Hopefully I don't make any spelling errors. And then I can say and return mocks.personal data. So now I've created a spy object. Let's mock a service. So the service has a get method which returns the get function. This still doesn't work because I need to provide my Angular module. I have to intercept it and override the actual dependency that's going to be injected with the service that I just mocked. So what you do is you say module demo, which is the module, and then function $provide. So now I can say $provide .value, and the service is called this, and I'm going to, instead of injecting the actual service, I'm going to inject the service object which I just created. So I can actually verify that my service is going to be called instead of underneath the API, because we've already tested that. So if you look at the test over here, I already created a test, didn't implement it yet. So what we want to do is we want to expect the get function to have been called. So if my controller, my controller is going to fetch the data, I expect it to actually call the service. And I want to expect that the scope, that the data that I get from my service is going to be put in my scope. So scope.personal data into be mocks.personal data. So this should be working. Should. So let's add all the tests again. And did I forget something?
No, we'll see.
So what you see now is I've successfully tested my code using unit tests. And if I want to have a report, we generate a coverage report, which is used for every application to see if we meet the threshold of that we set in the build system. So it's easily to create a unit test which touches all the functions, so you get 100% function coverage. But to actually test the branches and the statements, you really have to do something. So if you look in the controller, I actually tested that if an event is sent and it's active and it's valid, it's going to update the scope and send out a broadcast so the wizard can do his thing. So that's basically how we test. We test and use mocks for our unit tests. So every service needs to be mocked. So we only want, as we said in the presentation, we only want to test the individual pieces of code and not the integration. We should do that in the end-to-end tests. So if I would write an end-to-end test for this application, I would use Protractor. Artem already showed us how you can set it up and how it's it's able to run. So what we do is, well, we use protractor. We go to a URL, and we have a couple of scenarios which tell us how the application should work. So as you can see, protractor, if you use protractor without the page objects, you get code like this, which is unreadable. Well, it might be readable now, but if you don't touch it every week or every day, if you look at it a week from now, you have to look in why it worked as you thought it would. So if we would write a code here, I would have to say, well, it should have the first step active on the start page. So if I start the server, and I open the app, I expect this step to be active at the moment when I enter the page. So the first step should be active, not the second step. So if I want to test this, I need to go dive into the code to see how it works. So we have a wizard. Well, I can go through the entire XPath, but what I can do also is just write it out. So we have we are going to fetch the elements, and I'm going to fetch the get the element by ID. So our application, as we specified in our configuration object, is using the ID demo. So if I go here, and you can see here it is using the ID demo. So next I want to see which page is active. So I go into the breadcrumb, which is the part on the top, and I'm going to say on this element I'm going to expect an element, and I'm going to fetch it by class, by CSS, and it's going to be called ing wizard breadcrumb. And next, underneath that one, I am going to get the list of elements. So I'm going to say elements.all, which basically is a utility method from protractor, which says I want to get all the elements underneath the tree I'm in, matching the criteria that I specify. So I'm going to specify by CSS, and it's going to be a list item. And then I'm going to fetch the first one. Let's get the first item, and I'm going to get the attribute class, and that should expect this one to contain active. Well, this is, if you read this doesn't really feels right, because you need to do a lot of stuff like this. So instead of creating a page object, which I'm going to show you later on, I'm just going to run the task. So runs. And it's going to start Safari using all the end-to-end tests. So I'm going to do a lot of verifications. If you submit and you have an empty field, you don't enter a valid TOM code, it should not go to the last step. Well, as you can see, well, this worked. And what's cool is we also have coverage. So what we do and what we are trying to implement at ING at the moment is add a new build criteria, which says you need to have code coverage of your end-to-end tests above a certain threshold. So we've used protractor coverage and done a lot of tweaking and stuff, which I'll show later. But if you look at the coverage of the end-to-end test,
but how could you define the acceptation criteria in an end-to-end test? Because this is a scenario not regarding the DOM, but regarding the interaction with the user. How you define the acceptation?
You mean the scenarios, which,
yeah.
Well, maybe you want to tell something about the web-end scenario?
Well, but it's not the question, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, because you showed here the coverage end-to-end, but this is not representative from the real test.
True. Yeah, I've just created a simple test which does a lot of executes a lot of scenarios. If I will show you the data. What we do is, well, this is a simple test. It says we should have 3 steps. That's basically the default. Well, they should show it like that. And here we have a couple of scenarios. So on the change step, should have the first step active, should navigate to the next step. When pressing next, should not navigate. So we define a lot of scenarios into the end-to-end tests that should represent the complete state of your form in the wizard, for instance, over here. So the acceptance criteria should be I want to, if I navigate from the first step to the second step and I do not enter the correct data, it should not go to the next step. It's basically user input. What he has shown is a little bit more in detail because you have a lot of scenarios in your end-to-end tests. This is just a basic test, but you should test all the scenarios you can think of that are in your acceptance criteria in your end-to-end tests. So you write a lot of end-to-end tests to match your criteria.
And to make sure your application function works.
Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah.
Just a follow-up is for the unit test, I get that you basically want to touch every line, so I get a coverage report.
Mm-hmm.
My aim of my end-to-end test is not to cover each line. I just want to complete a certain task. So
True.
What is the aim of your coverage?
What we want to do is we're in an enterprise environment. So what we have is a build system which builds not only the component library, but also all projects that are using the component library. And if teams override functionality in their application, for instance, you can say override the navigation. So I want to do something before I submit. They need to create an end-to-end test which simulates the behavior and test if their functional change, their override, still works in their end-to-end test. So if we, for instance, change the core, which I'm going to do in a minute, the end-to-end test should not fail because their override behavior should still work. And for us, it gives us a guarantee that if we change a core component, we do not break an implementation of a team. So if we go to production and we have made a change, for instance, I'm going to change the if you look at the wizard.
Yeah, if you're coding for the customer, so eventually with end-to-end testing, you should hit all lines. If you're not doing that, well, why do you have to code?
Yeah, you find obsolete code using end-to-end test. But what you see over here is we have a next button and a previous button, which are the next is on the left and the previous is on the right. So sounds like, well, to me it sounds a little bit weird because next is that way and that's well. So if I'm going to change these buttons, the end-to-end test should not break. If I can let me fix the other test and then I'm going to change the application here. So we've implemented this test, and let's do this one. Let's just copy paste this. Let me see. Get the footer, and in the footer we have an anchor. So I'm going to click in the footer on a next button, and
is my tag name.
thank you. Tag name. So and then there are two, because mainly you have next and previous. So get the first one, and then click. And then I want to expect that the active step is not active anymore. So I'm going to copy this one again. Sorry, it should be active on the second step. So if I'm going to run the test now, it should start protractor, running the test, and hopefully it works. It's running it, by the way, on two browsers, so Firefox and Safari. And we can just change the protractor configuration to match any browser we have. So we use a Selenium grid in which we can add specific VirtualBox instances which represent, for instance, a Mac OS using Safari.
Same as browser stick, but then.
Yeah, but then locally, because.
So for free.
Well, yeah, you need a pretty big
Oh,
machine
yeah.
to host all the VirtualBox instances, and it needs to be maintained. And so I think, in the end, Source Labs or Browser Stack might be cheaper, but you now have flexibility to change and upgrade your system accordingly.
And otherwise, the internet connection would be quite big.
Yeah, because we test a lot of applications, and there are a lot of teams that have hundreds of tests. We run them all concurrent, but if you want to do that against Source Labs, I don't think the internet provider would be pleased. So what I've done is I've just finished the test, and it ran okay. But we are using a component library. So what happens if I change, for instance, the button sequence which you see over here? I'm going to change the next and the previous button. If teams use their implementation in a way like this, or define their own page objects for the component library, that would mean that we need to email every team that is going to use it and say, by the way, we changed this and this in that component. Please fix your tests. Well, that's not doable if you have now 30 teams, and we're growing. So if you have 100 applications or more, it's not doable anymore. So because we have a build system in which we say, well, we're going to use this and this and this version of Angular and the core, we can quite easily create page objects. So if I go to the core library and open the wizard and just change the order of and I change the order of the application of the buttons, I should fix my test, because my unit, I have a unit test which is going to test for a CSS class, which
It's not there.
I should actually not do, but I changed the order over here and over here. Let's see if this one works. And then I have a page object which I've created for the end-to-end test. So the unit tests are now running over here. And we have the page object which has a function which I already created, which is a navigate next and a navigate previous. So the unit test is passing. So let's do the entire build. So we are currently in a state where we are migrating from Karma end-to-end to protractor, but we still haven't migrated all the tests. So what you see here is it's now running all the unit tests on the FAT-ES browser. And now it's going to run Karma against Chrome. So there are a lot of tests. And now it's finished, and now it's going to start a protractor against Safari. So we have a mix of a lot of tests, but well, we need to migrate all the Karma end-to-end tests because the Angular team already abandoned it and migrated to a protractor. And as you can see, I've changed the order, and my test is still going okay. So the page object that I've created is still working. I haven't updated my demo application, so that should fail in a minute. So let's wait. I think it's almost done.
It's a lot of tests.
Yeah. It's at the final step. So. Okay, so now it's building and creating a package. So let's publish all the changes, updated the wizard, navigation, order. So let's push it to our repository. And then if I run the build over in the demo project, it's going to fetch all the Bower dependencies fresh. What you see over here is, well, it's getting Bower, and it's going to get a new Angular build. And now the end-to-end test should fail. It's still running. It should not go to step 2 because, well, dependencies are changed. So you see I have 9 tests that have failed, and well, basically if I go through the log, you can figure out what's going wrong. But, well, if you have 30 teams that are using the wizard, then I'm going to make this tiny change. I don't want all the teams to do manual work to fix this. So if I would use the page object, it would be more readable, and it would be feature change proof. Because if I change the component, I also change the page object. And if I use a unit test, well, I should mock my stuff. So the end-to-end test should only be changed. So if I look over here and I would write this first test, I would probably write something like this. Expect, by the way, I've inserted a page object using require.js, and so I can use it in my test, because the application was updated. I have a page object which I can use in my test. So if I change the test like this, I can just say wizard. The wizard as a constructor, which I can provide with the ID of the wizard. So you can just see wizard. The wizard has the ID demo I'm going to test here, and then I can say wizard dot breadcrumb dot item dot let's open item. dot active. So I've created a method dot active to be through v. So all of this will be replaced by this. So it's more readable. So I know a wizard is a breadcrumb, and I expect the first item to be active. It's a method. So if I just change this one and disable it, I should have, sorry, this doesn't actually change the outputs because I don't check the click. Let's wake up. So wizard dot navigate next dot navigate should do the same thing as this test. So replacing all the clicks in the tests. Let me see. Oh, one test should fail because I changed the previous button. But as you can see, it is now navigating to the next step again without having to change a lot of code. So teams should implement. So teams should only implement their end-to-end tests using the page objects, because we use a component library, and we should provide for each component a page object. So teams only need to worry about what they are doing in their application. It's like black box testing. So I should not have to know that the button that I'm going to click is an anchor or a button. I should only need to know that when I click it, it's going to navigate. So I think there's an instance of Safari hanging. Yeah, so using page objects for the component library makes your job a lot easier, because you can just easily write your tests. They're readable, and if the component library is changed, you don't have to worry about rewriting your tests and checking if everything works. It should just work. So the build is finished. I should have test coverage, which is of course 100%. Yep. Yeah, that's basically it. So using page objects, which are provided by the component library, we make writing end-to-end tests a lot easier and more structured and future-proof and change-proof. Yeah, I wouldn't want to do it any other way. So I think that's
not an invitation.
Yeah. So I think that's basically it. What we wanted to tell you. Are there any questions?
Can you explain some more about the wizard page object? How it's
Yeah, of course. So the wizard page object just basically specifies that there is an object which gets an ID. You just store it locally, and the element is stored in the object. So every time we want to fetch the header, we just go from the element to the object. It's like basically specifying which element you want to do in the page object instead of doing it in each implementation of the test. So yeah, basically what a team sees and the developer sees in their unit tests, or in their end-to-end tests, are things like wait, no, crap, that's the wrong one. Another one. Demonstrate. So they should only see these things, which is readable. So I have a navigation Next, I'm not interested in how it's done underneath. It's a black box test, so just use this as a as an interface to the component that you're using. So and you have also, of course, code completion. So let's say wizard dot steps dot. You see, it's a lot easier to write your test instead of having to dive into the HTML, because I didn't build the wizard, and I'm not interested in if it's working or how it's working. I mean, I'm just interested in if it's working like we expect it to do. So if you have, for instance, a bug, we can change it in one place instead of 100 projects. Yeah.
Is there a reason why you're using names like navigate and activate instead of click or things like that?
It basically, in the page object, it represents the state or an action that we want to do. If I have a wizard, I'm only interested in navigating. I don't care if I need to click a link or that it's triggered somewhere else.
No, but isn't that making testing more difficult to write because everything has another activate method?
I think that if you look at the documentation page that we've created, it specifies what a directive or a component does for you. It has a feature to navigate, so if you use that component, you know that you can navigate. Yeah, I don't care if I need to click it or it's triggered by a typing event or by an enter or whatever.
No, but you can possibly get all kinds of silly name, navigate back, navigate forward.
Yeah, well, you need to think hard before you create a component and the page object that is used as an interface to that component. So you need to challenge yourself, including the people that are working on the same component, to create a reasonable...
Did you set something in your styling guide for naming like things like this?
We do, yeah, but we're in the middle of the migration from Bootstrap 2 to 3, so a lot of things change. And the wizard is not really a component that's in a Bootstrap component base. You have a step navigator, so maybe we should rewrite this component and say it's a step navigator. You navigate to the next step. Then you have indeed a style guide that has a component defined which has behavior added by Angular and the page object that represents the interface to the entire thing. So yeah, it should.
It's not really documented, but
yeah, it is not really documented, but you have code completion in your IDE, so you know which objects you can use from the page object. But yeah, to get teams to work with it more easily.
Yeah, I get the motivation, but I think it's important to standardize things like navigate and navigate forward, navigate back.
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah.
Especially
to the backlog. Yeah.
So you said that in your end-to-end test you mock all the calls to the service call, all of them?
Yeah.
The question is, how do you make sure that the mocks get in sync with the real backend? Because that's, in this scenario, you have to make two choices. Or you mock everything and you have to make sure that it's fine. Because if you are not sure, you can be in a situation where your mocks are not in sync with your backend, and you cannot rely with your end-to-end test.
Yeah, true. What I think you should do in an end-to-end test is not actually look at the data you are receiving. So let's, for instance, say I have a account selector, which has 5 accounts and a total. I am not interested in that it says 100, 100, 100, but I'm interested in that they all sum up to the component. So what we can do is, for each scenario that you create, so each backend response, we should write smart tests that do not rely on specific state of
The state is not the issue. Is the structure of the JSON response change?
Oh, sorry.
And that
We have a strict rule that API should be backwards compatible.
Nobody ever changes.
Okay, yeah.
No, but you can change the API, but the old one should be able to still work, because APIs are can be shared across multiple applications. So you're not the only one that is using an application. So if we create an API, that should be the case.
Yeah,
Create a backwards compatible one or deploy one next to it.
And we test an integration with fitness.
Yeah.
So to make sure the application works with the real API, we use fitness to ensure that.
Do you also, so we're thinking about having a test set that changes API version 1, for example, and then never change. We also include testing with version 1, because version 1 was built on an old API and should not break anything. So do you things like that to safeguard your backwards compatibility? Because otherwise you would.
What we usually do is try to ensure that APIs are backwards compatible. If there is, by defining the interface that we agreed on, and if added extra features are added, it should not affect the old API. If you create a new API or really a completely new JSON response, for instance, you should deploy it next to it, or manage that all the applications that are using it are going to migrate and update their tests.
So if you, I think you probably have some changes in your API. Probably changes that won't affect backwards compatibility. But we're thinking about a way to automatically test those things. I mean, that still is probably manual labor and acceptance tests and stuff.
Well, no, that's the fitness testing.
In one of the teams that uses Mischa's stuff. And to test our API and make sure we don't break anything, we use the rest assured testing.
Yeah. Okay. So you need to unit test the API to make sure if you do a change, well, the unit test will fail. Then you know you're not backwards compatible anymore. So you need to think about the implementation.
But you can always change an API, but then you need to know who is using that API and manage the
of course.
the change. Yeah, and they should add new new tests to match the new test set. Sorry, the new API.
Yeah,
it's hard.
That's obvious. But I mean, when we write end-to-end tests on our API, so I do a call to our API and expect an answer. And like you said, I'm not interested in the contents of the answer, but I'm interested in the form of the answer that includes stuff.
Yeah.
But so when I change something in the API, I write a test that checks if the new field is in there.
Yeah.
But there's not a very good way, well, at least we don't have it yet, to check that your API change doesn't ever affect someone who started consuming it version 1.
We have the OTAP street, so every deployment is done through that street. We have some end-to-end tests using Fitness and Selenium, which test if the application still works. You should have an extra check in your OTAP street which assures that your application is still working. But we, by telling teams that they need to create a backwards compatible API, assures us that if they write their end-to-end tests using mocks and their unit tests, they should already trigger an error in their tests if the API changes, and they update, add a new scenario for that change. But, yeah.
I think currently the responsibilities are separated. You guys are responsible for guaranteeing that the front end is correct. And we as a team are responsible for guaranteeing that the correct version of the API is deployed when the correct version of the front end is deployed.
What are the reasons is there a particular reason why we're not using the actual API? I think it's hard, or to get the data fixed, or
well, it's hard, and because we're using 30 teams are using it, they're continuously deploying, so the API can be offline. Well, then the test fails, and then all module fail. We cannot go to the environment.
But API can't be offline, because in production it also.
In production it can't. No, but on your development environment it can.
Why?
Because if we start a project, who is to say that the API is already built? We define an interface in which we say this is going to be the JSON response that we expect from this service call. So it needs to be already built. It needs to be online, and nobody needs to change it, because if we run end-to-end tests against a real-life service, it can be done. Somebody is deploying. Somebody else changed the data set that the API is using. So you don't really have a standard, solid base to which you can test. And it's very slow, because using HTTP backend, it's much faster than.
Yes, of course, but gives you some more guarantee everything really integrates well. I can imagine, because it's hard to get data fixed and a stable hooked but well, it's possible.
That's not nice. That's why we have fitness. So every deployment,
of course, it's possible.
We run everything against real data as well. It takes 8-10 hours.
We're running it twice or 3 times a day.
Yeah, but that's not working in an agile environment. Because teams are continuously changing their API.
Not that it's the only. I think this is good art, but if you can, it would be possible to add the real end-to-end, the real integration with the real system. Well, it might be valuable. I think it's hard. You have to make the decision. It is
I think what we have now is a build system which automatically deploys through the entire street, but teams still check their application on the integration environment, and they can do it automatically using Protractor against the test set that they already defined, or they can do it manually, or it's up to them to do that. But integrating a real backend API in a continuous delivery street with 30 to 60 projects, would take forever. We now can deploy every 5 minutes on the development environment. If we test it against a real-life service with all the end-to-end tests, we can do it probably twice a day if we're lucky. Yeah.
A very different question. These page objects, are you using them for anything other than tests?
No. At least I am not. Maybe somebody else.
They provide interaction, deep interaction into the component, which you probably don't want people to reach other type tests. It's just for that. Where did you get the idea for these page objects?
From the Protractor side.
From Germany.
Yeah. Well, basically, we come from a situation where we used fitness. They have like a fixture object, which is basically the same as the page object that Protractor tells you to use, because you don't want to be. It is a black box test, and you are only interested in the functional working of the component or the application that you're building. You're not in your end-to-end test. You're not interested in it is a button or it is an anchor tag.
Yeah, I understand. I think it's a clever thing that one comes from another ecosystem or culture.
It's a little bit of both. We have the fixture stuff that you have in fitness, and the Protractor, what they tell you could use using your end-to-end test on the Protractor website. Yeah. But you could use this as well if you're using the old Karma end-to-end test. It's just a require object using Selenium underneath. Yeah. You're next.
all the way in the beginning you were saying you had a style guide which you find through your presentation, and then the components are based on just behavior.
Yep.
But in your page objects, most of the selectors that you use are actually CSS selectors.
True. Yeah.
Why is it that you do you also use those for the directives, or why don't you?
They are used in the directives. The wizard has a template which is based on style classes and IDs that we assign to specific components. The specific elements. So if you, for instance, have a wizard footer, it has a CSS style class wizard footer. The only way we use this is because Selenium allows us to target a specific element based on a tag or a CSS or an ID element. So that's basically the only way you can interact directly. You can do it by XPath, but that would be really stupid, I think, because you get like XPath and a team.
If you add a one div.
Yeah, if you have, for instance, the wizard, and I'm going to do it based on XPath, if somebody changes or adds something in between the XPath expression changes, or I need to make it so generic that it works. But yeah.
I understand. I was always wondering, like, should I add, for instance, just an extra data attribute just for testing as a selector? Because you might have other developers working just on the styling, and I wouldn't expect it if I change the CSS class that it breaks an end-to-end test because.
No, yeah, well, you will always have that if somebody changes the styling. They should be aware that there are components that are using using that template and adding behavior to it. So, yeah, but yeah, he was first.
Yeah, I just want to add something to the discussion because I like the approach, but it's nothing special. It's just software design.
Yeah.
And it's not naming things by mechanism, but by intention. And that allows you to swap out the implementation, which is clicking, swiping, whatever.
Yeah.
And if you change the implementation, or if you down in real like nitty-gritty, then you have to change it in one place, and then everything will work.
Yeah.
So it's isolating stuff that needs to be changed in one single spot.
Yep.
And this is like less brittle design than explicitly saying it in XPath. It's actually the same thing as the problem that you had before because you're explicit in where things are.
Yeah. And I'm not interested in how it's implemented. What you say, if I have a button or an anchor or whatever, a swipe, I'm not interested in that it is triggered like that. I'm just interested in that it is going to be triggered.
You're declaring something instead of pointing to where it is.
Yeah.
Have you found yourself combining components into bigger components already?
Yeah. We have a lot of nested directives. The wizard, for instance, is a nested. We have a nested directive structure. So we have a wizard which has a wizard header and a footer and wizard steps and wizard step directives. So yeah, we do. We have a complete. A lot of components are built up from smaller directives. They should have only one functionality. If there are more than 150 lines of code, you probably have a mix of
responsibility.
Responsibility, yeah.
You mentioned that, if I understand correctly, that you don't use Protractor with the real server just because it's too slow, and you're using
that's one of the things.
Other tool, I don't know, fitness. Or,
no,
I was just wondering what does make the other tool that you use fast enough.
No, we use Protractor because with Mox because it's faster, and B because we want to test it locally in a build system, independent of which environment an API is deployed on. But we are using as well fitness as well. and it's slow because you are really into testing. And what we want to do is test the applications against multiple browsers, like we all are the entire internet application that we are building. It needs to be run on IE9 and Firefox and on specific targets. So where we want to go to is that we are going to test it against all those environments in our automated build on a nightly scale. So we are going to run everything nightly on all browsers, and just the default test set against, for instance, Chrome or whatever you think.
Is that a wrapper around Projector?
Which one?
Like the tool that you use to test it with the real backend?
Fitness is a wraparound on Selenium. So it's the same thing as Protector, but, well.
Yes, I'm just wondering what are the differences?
No, Fitness is a functional acceptance and regression testing wiki in which you can write your tests as a DSL. Yeah. So what you do is you create a page object. They call it fixtures, and what they do is, if you want to, for instance, here you have element dot by ID. They have, if you integrate Selenium with Fitness, you have, for instance, Selenium dot get element by ID, which does the same underneath. It uses Selenium to interact with the browser. Only this can be run from the grunt build, and this is quite easily to set up because, well, you just basically have a protractor config file, and you can write your tests locally in where you have Fitness, which you need to host, in which you need to write tests. You don't have a, you can automate it in a repository like Git to store all the tests, but it's more work. It is easier, I think, to understand for people who are interested in your acceptance criteria and which tests you have defined. Because if you look at this, there are a lot of things that somebody who doesn't program and wants to see what you've done cannot read. And they can in Fitness, because it's, well, you have scenarios in which you can write DSL-like syntax. So you can say, when I click on this link, this and this should happen. In those syntax, you can write your test. You could do it here, but it's a lot of, it's work. Page objects are like fixtures in Fitness, and they basically do the same, only the interface is different. You have a wiki on Fitness, and you have a ID in Protractor.
I do think that the learning curve of Protractor is way better than for Fitness.
Yep.
It was way longer to get Fitness up and running.
In one of your early slides, you was said you build and deploy every 5 minutes to development, every 30 minutes to test, and every 2 hours to accept.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why you don't always deploy as fast as possible to test and acceptance?
Yes. The build system is scheduled every 5 minutes for development because triggering from all the repositories that are using the Spectacular code would be probably trigger more builds than we have now, because if you have 30 teams that are committing, every commit should trigger a build. Well,
yeah. Well, I was just more wondered about the deployment to test and acceptance. Why are you waiting 30 minutes for that?
What we've done is each team has 4 branches, one for develop, one for test, one for AWP. We've took that approach because we only want the development branch to go to the development street, and because we built every application in one build system, we do not want to have a management system in which we can say, well, this version should go to development, this one should go from this project to this environment. It's a lot of work, and this is, I think, the most easy way to streamline the process. So if you check in and develop, you go to develop. If you want to go to test, you merge your development brand to test, and it's automatically deployed. So people work on develop. If a feature is done, they merge it to test. So the cycle on the test environment is much slower than on develop. So that's why we do it every 5 minutes to develop and every 30 minutes to test.
And just asking this, we're also struggling with trying to work towards continuous delivery. But if I'm right, if you only so let's say deploy every 2 hours to acceptance, well, there's no need to go every 50 minutes to production.
No, yeah. Well, going every 50 minutes to production is not the goal.
Okay.
We've put it on the horizon, so we want to be able to do that.
Okay.
It's not that we go to production 2 or 3 times a day at the moment. So it should not be a goal. Well, it is a goal which we set, but it's not what we focus on. The whole idea was to deploy and create new features more rapidly than we used to, and setting that target took us there. So.
Okay.
I wonder what your strategy is. It doesn't relate to AngularJS particularly, but your strategy is against type juggling and not having types basically. Because do you do defensive programming, or I mean, I imagine that if you type in an amount in some form and somehow because of information flow in your system, somehow it gets converted to a string and you don't detect it, and then it ends up being the wrong amount or something. I mean, these mistakes are easy to make.
Because it's not type safe, you have to do a lot of checking. So, for instance, we have an amount directive, which we have, I think, about 150 unit tests for, including all kinds of input that you can possibly think of. So, yeah, that's the downside of using JavaScript. It's not type safe.
Do you actually turn an amount into a proper object so that everything that takes an amount knows that it gets an amount and not an integer?
The model should be something different than the view value. So you have a number, it's an amount. The view value can be a string using containing a formatted string. So, for instance, if you have an amount, you want it to have two decimals and a dot after 3.
You never treated that as a primitive, but you picked it up as a concept.
Dank je, Mischa.
Okay, that was it. Thank you for coming. Have a nice evening, and see you next time.